But, you know, the proposals that the Home Secretary has put forward, you know, Nigel Farage has praised her and said, yep, this sort of is in line with, you know, with what we were fighting for. And I think
it sounds like she's auditioning for the Reform Party.
Yeah, she'd be very welcome, you know. But there are so many Labour backbenchers who have been very vocal, actually. You know, Stella Creasy, she looks after Walthamstow, MP for Walthamstow. She said this feels performatively cruel. So, I mean, the Labour Party is fractured, you know, that's no secret. But it's, you know, these radical suggestions are only going to exacerbate the cracks.
Hello, I am Ben Zand.
Yes, and I'm Stacey Dooley.
And this is our podcast, Untangled.
So I suppose the biggest story, certainly for us, you know, here in the UK this week, is the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. She has come out, hasn't she, and said that she is proposing these new policies surrounding, you know, UK asylum. And it feels very radical. And I think some people have, you know, felt like she has gone down, she's heading in the right direction. There are other people that fundamentally disagree with what it is that she's put forward. We totally appreciate that immigration, asylum, refugee status, these are such emotive topics. And, you know, the country does feel very divided at the moment. It does feel like people, you know, it's very sort of polarising.
So I think like Labour are recognising, as the Conservatives did before them, that like asylum and illegal immigration are like the big issue they need to solve. What's interesting is it seems to be really difficult to solve, because each time a new Home Secretary comes in, they say they're going to kind of like solve illegal immigration, solve the kind of migrant crisis that never seems to happen. And this time what they've decided to do is go, okay, we have a solution and we're going to basically look to Denmark.
Yeah, so they're essentially mirroring or proposing to kind of, you know, do what Denmark have done for the last decade or so. And they would say it's worked. They would say that the numbers have dropped drastically, you know, for the Danish people. Yeah,
so I think like a big part of this is kind of obviously Denmark has had success in this area. So like in 2014, so Denmark had a total of 14,792 asylum seekers, and by 2021 that figure dropped to 2,000. So Denmark kind of introduced these much stricter kind of you know, rules around asylum. One of them is that they introduced a kind of temporary refugee status, and I think that's one of the big points that they're trying to bring in here, which is, I think, you know, after, as it currently stands, when you apply for kind of refugee status and you're an asylum seeker, if you're granted that, you're given a kind of indefinite leave to remain, and then after 5 years currently, you can then apply to become settled in the UK. What they're now proposing is that you will get a temporary refugee status, which will be reviewed every 30 months to kind of see if the country you've come from is a safe country yet, basically. So, you know, like if the situation has changed, and then as you were saying, like after 20 years, it will take 20 years to then be able to apply to become a permanent resident of the country, which is a long time.
I know. And I know the pair of us, like, I think it's really important to contribute to the conversation. And I don't subscribe to the idea that you can only have this conversation if you're some sort of highbrow journo. But it's like, you do feel nervous even talking about immigration, because you don't want to say something clumsy and then it be misinterpreted.
Yeah, and I guess because there's legitimate gripes on all sides, I think, you know, like we are seeing, you know, really high levels of kind of both legal immigration and also asylum seekers coming to the UK. I mean, I think kind of really interesting aspect of it is like, obviously we had Brexit in, you know, people voted for Brexit in 2016. A huge part of that was kind of to take control of our broad borders, to kind of generally take control of the amount of people coming into the country. What's actually happened since Brexit is effectively the exact opposite. We've seen more immigration to the country than we previously had. And the kind of types of people coming into the country has also radically changed. Prior to Brexit, the majority of people were from European countries, and now they're not. They're from kind of countries that people, you know, less Western. So I think, you know, there's this general sense that like people's voices haven't been heard. What they voted for, they kind of say that they thought they were kind of making some kind of, you know, decision on the future and the direction of Britain. Clearly people feel as though, I think there's like kind of two elements to it. I think one is that people feel as though asylum seekers are being given opportunities they're not. They're being given kind of housing that they're not. Public funding is going towards kind of making asylum seekers giving them accommodation in hotels or in kind of private accommodation. And then I think on the other hand, people feel like the culture of the country is changing. And I think the kind of two things that always get kind of conflated in this are legal immigration and asylum seeking, which is completely separate things, but they get kind of band together. And you kind of get the sense that people, and clearly because of the fact it's such a big political kind of talking point, and the fact that reform is riding so high off the back of this, clearly people feel like there's something massively broken. The government's saying there's something broken about the asylum system, and it does seem like there are many aspects of it that are broken. So this seems to be structured around like, let's create a deterrent, so people stop trying to get here, and also let's do something that feels to the public like something big is happening, so that we're listening to their needs. And the deterrents are kind of like, yeah, as we spoke about, it's much harder to get refugee status. I mean, it's harder to get permanent refugee status. It's harder to bring family members over now. That's going to be one of the things. It's much more difficult to kind of have your family members come and join you. It's going to be harder to get housing support and benefits from the government. So it's all these things that are kind of tightening the screws. And I think a big part of their hope is probably that it just stops people making the trip in the first place.
Some people are saying, yeah, this is like a step in the right direction. This is what we want to hear. And other people are just saying, where on earth has our empathy disappeared to? Like, are these the kinds of conversations that we're seriously having now in Great Britain?
I think the government is clearly terrified that if they don't do something, they're just going to be wiped out in the next election, and Nigel Farage will be the next prime minister. And I think, as always, I think it's not necessarily, I think that people aren't compassionate to the point that they don't want to help other people. I think the sense seems to be kind of, our lives aren't where we want them to be, so sort out the native population of Britain before you extend the hand to others.
I mean, it's that old age question, though, isn't it? It's like, who's to blame? It's undeniable that the cost of living crisis is crippling people, and people are working tirelessly, and their lives are very, very difficult day to day. But it's like, whose fault is that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's a separate conversation, maybe. But
I don't think it is a separate conversation. I think it's totally valid. I think there's kind of two questions that come off the back of it, which is like, the government's made this kind of, it was interesting. Like, this was kind of briefed out by the government days in advance. Like, clearly they're doing this as like a big political moment where they're trying to kind of convince the population that Labour is doing something about the biggest issue people care about. So then there's the question of like, will it actually achieve the things people are practically worried about? I think a lot of people, if you think about what people actually care about, it's like, can I afford things? Can I afford to buy bread and eggs? Can I get a house? And can I get an NHS appointment?
When we're talking about immigration, illegal immigration, one of the, people's biggest gripe is, inevitably the conversation heads towards the lack of housing, the lack of social housing, the pressures on the NHS, like chronic underfunding. I suppose from their point of view, people who have, genuine concerns, they would say, if you're allowing tens of thousands of illegal immigrants in, is that not another added pressure?
Yeah, to an already overburdened system. Because
it's that chronic underfunding. There are so many things to take into consideration that are nothing to do with asylum seekers. And I sort of, I don't want to bang that drum too much, because it's sort of painfully predictable that two people who are probably, will work in the media, like, it's very easy for us to make those statements. But the proposals that the Home Secretary has put forward, Nigel Farage has praised her and said, yeah, this sort of is in line with with what we were fighting for. And I think
it sounds like she's auditioning for the Reform Party.
She'd be very welcome, But there are so many Labour backbenchers who have been very vocal, actually. Stella Creasy, she looks after Walthamstow, MP for Walthamstow. She said this feels performatively cruel. So, I mean, the Labour Party is fractured, that's no secret, but it's, these radical suggestions are only going to exacerbate the cracks.
And also just that sense of kind of like, what is Britishness, that fight for the heart of our kind of identity as a country. Because like, you can't really remove Brexit from this conversation in the sense of like, which people don't like talking about, but like, since Brexit, there has been a noticeable shift in the types of people who have come over to Britain. Prior to Brexit, it was much more Europeans would be coming to Britain because you had freedom of movement. Since then, Britain has still needed migrants to work in things like the healthcare sector, tech, agriculture, and those roles have been predominantly filled by people who aren't European, often from Muslim countries or countries that might not fit into kind of, conventional Western kind of values or identities, to work as doctors or care workers to help British people. And you kind of get the sense that actually what's happening underlying all of this is like, what is Britishness now? There's kind of a movement, I think, in multiple parts of the world for like just ethno-nationalism, this idea of like, to be British, you need to be a white Christian. If you're from like a kind of Muslim nation, you actually just don't fit in. So it's not really about, or part of it might be economical, but a big part of it is like, your identity does not fit in with who we want here anymore. And that can be right or wrong if you want that to be the case, but that's what makes it,
But it's like, what is Britishness? Because, it's open to interpretation. The idea that, every British person, holds the same ideals and the same values and behaves the same and is interested in the same things is insane, no?
Oh no, it is, and but it's fascinating because you see this online. There's like this whole kind of trend of YouTube videos. Like I think we've got a clip of it to play. Like, and it's a white South African guy.
Oh, you told me about this guy. Yeah, go on.
But he's a kind of white South African dude, and he goes to this place you might know called Luton.
Never heard of it.
Which is where you're from for listeners of the podcast who don't know that.
LU2.
And he goes there, and he's kind of trying to demonstrate that like kind of Britain has fallen. It's kind of been taken over by migrants.
A country or a city is not the architecture or the roads or the infrastructure. No, guys, it's the people. When you replace the people, you lose the country. England is the English. If there's no more English, there's no more England.
Does he live here or does he live in South Africa?
He's like a traveller. I don't know
Fine,
where
so
he
he
lives,
doesn't
but he
live
goes
here.
to loads of places
Fine.
and makes these YouTube
Okay,
videos.
yeah.
And the title of the video is The Worst Town in Britain. And he's trying to demonstrate kind of how Muslims and asylum seekers have taken, and he just before he walks up to him, he does this thing where he says something like, the kind of, a place isn't defined by its like infrastructure, it's defined by its people. And then he says to a guy, where are you from? And the guy goes, Kabul. And he says, do you like Luton? And the guy goes, yeah. And it's like a demonstration that like, just Britain has gone. And again, it's that sense of like, to be British, you need to be white and Christian. And you see this across the board. There's so many of these videos. And that's why it's like, there's a legitimate conversation to be had for sure. The team did actually reach out to Kate Cuz, who was that kind of South African guy in Luton, but he didn't reply.
Oh, look, Luton is always kind of singled out. Whenever you're talking about immigration, illegal immigration, multiculturalism, there's always eyes on Luton. And, understandably so, like the makeup, it is incredibly diverse, particularly pockets. There's an area called Berry Park. It's predominantly, there's lots of Asian families there, lots of Irish families
I've
there.
been to Berry Park, yeah.
Oh, have you been?
Yeah, I did a doc in Berry Park.
Have you?
Yeah.
When?
So I did it in about probably 2016. I was doing a documentary about ex-Muslims, and I went to Berry Park to interview an imam in a mosque.
So you know what it looks like, Berry Park. But listen, the idea that you feel threatened or like, you don't feel like you're in Britain or like, it makes you sort of question.
But people will feel uncomfortable about it. They'll feel as though there's places in the UK that are no longer British to them. Like that kind of that traditional sense of like, I mean, exactly what the hell? I actually don't know what it is if you're trying to kind of sum up what Britishness is. But I guess they'll look to those communities, and it's actually something that Denmark's done, which is, they've created this rule that basically if an area becomes over 50% of the kind of native population or non-Western population, they can then move those people around as a kind of like integration method.
What do you do? Do you take families out of their homes and place them in other parts of Denmark?
I assume so. It's a good question. That's something. Yes.
How much does that cost? How much of it feels, realistic? How much of it feels achievable, viable, and how much of it feels performative and just sort of pandering to the right-wing tabloids and the right-wing voices?
I guess a lot of it, because there's a political element of it, of trying to get people to support the Labour Party at a time that they feel as though they're losing votes. But I think one thing that is often ignored in this conversation as well is like, they actually have already stopped people trying to come through many routes. Like people used to try and come on planes with fake passports. That's now got harder. Then they came in the lorries. That got harder. So now they come on small boats. There's a reason so many people are coming on small boats, and there's a reason there's a big smuggling network behind it. And that's because they've made it really difficult, many people would say, as they should, to get into Britain via other means. So people are now trying to get onto boats to get here.
Well, to caveat some of these suggestions, she did say that she was going to work on making more safe routes an option, like a viable option. So, you know, that's sort of a priority for her as well.
Yeah, because that's one of the criticisms, is that it's actually really difficult to get to, because, you know, the idea is
we're coming here illegally because it's more difficult to come here legally.
To claim asylum in like a normal manner. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I made a doc kind of about probably 8 years ago for the BBC going along the kind of migrant trails. So I went to kind of Libya, Niger and Nigeria. And a big part of that at that time, this is in like, I think it was in like 2016 when, you know, the kind of migrant crisis was out of control at that point because of wars in Syria and kind of conflict around the world. And a big part of that was trying to understand, you know, why people are coming and the money that's being made from it. And I think the kind of question around deterrence is one of those things that, first of all, I highly doubt people coming on those routes right now are really, you know, they're probably not listening to Untangled. They're probably not that kind of into the British press. So they're not necessarily seeing what the Home Secretary is saying. Actually, what they're doing, and at the time what I saw, it's way more they're talking to people they know, family members, friends, who are already in the UK, who are telling them, and quite often spinning them a yarn about what the quality of life is like.
You've just mentioned some African countries there, Ben, and that's something else that the Home Secretary has commented on. She was essentially saying, I'm going to think about visa bans for 3 African countries, Angola, Namibia,
and the DRC,
and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And lots of people have labelled that Trumpian. Like, you know, he was talking about banning people from Muslim countries. So this is just language that I don't think we're used to associating with a Labour government, a British government. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the DRC. I made a couple of films, I think, in the DRC. So one of the countries that Shabana Mahmood has highlighted. And it was, I spent time in Kinshasa. Have you been?
I've been to the Congo.
Oh, yeah. So different.
As in the rainforest.
Yeah. Nice. So I spent time in like Kinshasa, and then I spent time in Goma. And the film, we were looking at child soldiers, and maybe this is going sort of too off piece slightly, but I think you can't sort of forget, whilst we need to have these conversations, and they're important conversations, I also don't think you have to bear in mind what some of these individuals have been through. Sometimes, like prepubescent kids, like, you know, we made this film about child soldiers, and it was basically, you know, you had these sort of you had these armed groups going into villages and just literally, Ben, taking young lads out of their family homes and giving them guns and forcing them to shoot like family members. And once you've done that, like, you know, you've traumatized this poor child. And then when they ask him to shoot somebody that he doesn't know, it's no issue. So this is going, you know, this isn't some sort of unverified post that I've seen on Facebook. Like, I've had these conversations face to face, you know.
Yeah, and that's what I hate about this conversation, because I think like people, you get kind of punished for having compassion, I think, and people kind of see you as like kind of unrealistic, and like, and I think you can both acknowledge that clearly, you know, if you're British and you're unable to kind of turn your lights on and afford things that you want, you're going to feel aggrieved at the fact that people who aren't British are being given things that, or if you're being told people who aren't British are getting these things.
I don't envy Shabana Mahmood. It's like, how do you, you know, how do you fix this problem? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm sure you get into politics because you want to do the right thing and you want to serve the British public, and, you know.
Well, some people would argue fix the problem by having such insane inequality in the world and stop making it so that people have to flee from certain countries to get to other countries. Yeah.
Like, how do you do that then?
Well, there's a more positive aspect of the story, actually, which is the millionaires. So there's this like really interesting campaign. A lot of people would argue like so much about kind of migration and asylum seeking is about inequality. And there's a kind of group of millionaires called the Patriotic Millionaires, one of whom is the guy who used to be the chair of Greggs. Ian Greggs, yeah. And he kind of organized this, like, they organized this like kind of bus campaign and calling for people who earn more to pay more tax. It's the inequality that exists behind all of this. And that is causing, first of all, people to leave this country to come to that country, and also causing British people to feel as though they're not getting what they need in life because the world's very unequal. So these guys are calling for like a kind of changed tax system where wealthier people get taxed more, and it would bring in, you know, a lot of money. What's the exact figure of how much?
36 billion.
Wow, that's it. There you go.
Oh, well, there you go. Problem
There you
solved.
go. The problem is actually solved.
Oh, fine. So maybe we could just fix the country.
Yeah, with our 36 billion pounds.
But you are right. You are right. You know, people have concerns, and people aren't happy. They're hugely frustrated. I got in 2 cabs the other day. Right, I've just literally thought about this. I was working in London, and then I came home to Liverpool. I got in 2 black cabs, one in London, centre of London, and one here at the train station. Got off the train, and both of the guys said the same thing to me. They said they were going on these marches. They were going to the same march, you know, the march that Tommy Robinson,
yeah.
Katie Hopkins, they labelled it the silent majority.
Mm-hmm.
And they were both going to this march, and they were both saying the same thing. So 2 different cabbies in 2 different cities were both just saying that they felt like illegal immigration was totally out of control, and that frightens them, and they felt like it was infringing. It was a problem for their Britishness.
That's a cultural thing.
It's
isn't it?
interesting
Like they feel as
too,
though the culture's being
eroded,
changed,
I
like just kind of
suppose.
who British people are.
But isn't change inevitable? And then, you know, and it was interesting, you know, so I sort of quite like having conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with on every point or understand. But it is just interesting that 2 different men from 2 different cities, the same occupation, were saying exactly the same thing to me.
Well, I think a big part of that is kind of, what people are seeing on the internet as well.
Yeah.
One of the kind of most fascinating developments in all of this was, did you see that video of
The Sri Lankan guy?
No, the people protesting in Benidorm.
Oh my God.
So there was like a kind of big British march. People
so
with
they had
all
the
these
Union
Union
Jacks
Jack flags, like wearing like balaclavas, some of them, like all, protesting against kind of immigration and Keir Starmer in Spain.
Keir Starmer's a wanker.
In a kind of, in Benidorm. Which is just fascinating. I think that's a kind of caveat, part of the story that is also slightly undercovered, which is British people are quite terrible at integrating when they go to places. If you go to like a British holiday destination, it's not like people are eating like chorizo and kind of paella. There's like pubs, chips and eggs. It's like, so that kind of idea that like, oh, we're gonna make sure everyone integrates really well into Britain. Just like, well, okay, but also we should probably. And I think that's separating this out. There's definitely legitimate concerns people have. But also, there is definitely racism that is involved in this.
Yes.
And I think you kind of have to acknowledge that. I see it myself, and I see it with the docs I make, the comments on the docs. Like now, just increasingly, the amount of comments that are like, he's just a Muslim Asian guy. And and it's like, that's just become so much more. Yeah, but he obviously, like if I do something on, like I did something recently about
you.
About me, yeah.
Yes.
I did a thing recently about a kind of whites only town in South Africa and I did that specifically for this, which is like, people are kind of creating these ethno communities or whatever. And just like the amount of comments that'll just be like, he's an Asian Muslim guy. Obviously he thinks this, or he's a Muslim. It's like, and it's just like that kind of categorization of like, you're actually not British anymore. People were asking whether Rishi Sunak was British because he's like an Indian dude. And I think, more and more as these conversations comes out and people's concerns come out, it's hard separating it between like, you have a genuine concern about the flow of migrants into the country, which totally, let's talk about that and about what asylum seekers are given. But then the other side is like, well, you're just not British and you literally can never be British because you're not.
That's something that's been aimed at Shabana Mahmood herself, though. She was very clear that, some of the some of the language thrown at her has been full of venom. I mean, people have called her an effing the P word, she has been the receiver of like horrendous racism. And I do sometimes think, I wonder if, she's an Asian British lady putting these proposals forward. I wonder if, like, I understand people's confusion that she's the one delivering these ideals.
I feel like, there's a kind of sense around, like, obviously you have Priti Patel and kind of Suella Braverman for Conservatives. I feel like, there's kind of, I suppose, you're trying to get people who understand this a sense of what it means to be not, kind of conventionally British in those roles so that their kind of messaging works better. I think the kind of slight problem with it as well is like Labour adopting what many would see as kind of reform policies, like it feels like an interesting political move because, if you're kind of, as critics would say, parroting another party's politics, why would people vote for you by the time an election comes around? Because you're not really, and you kind of do get the sense from them that they're just like frantically trying to figure out how they can survive in a kind of changing political climate.
So we know that we would assume that Keir Starmer's on board. We know that Nigel Farage has welcomed these suggestions. Kemi Badenoch, leader of the Tory Conservative Party, she said that they were positive baby steps. The Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, he has branded Labour a government of cowards.
I mean, you can understand why people are pissed off in the sense of like immigration has been such a big issue or on a lot of people's minds for a long time. Such a huge part of Brexit was control the borders, take back control. That was the messaging that was going on. And then to see immigration rise since then, you can understand why people on the ground are like, what the hell is going on? I mean, whether you agree with the amount of people coming into the country or not, whether you agree that Britain should, what the identity of Britishness is, I suppose the basic idea of the democratic principle of if you vote for something and you expect something to happen, politicians to deliver on their word, and then they don't, which just seems to be what's happened. You can understand why people are like, well, I'm really pissed off now. And I feel as though I'm literally not being heard at all. So we're going to take to the streets and we're going to protest unless you actually do something about it. So yeah, after that kind of huge and quite heavy topic, a much for no one, but involving some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
you know what
okay,
I mean?
Ben.
So
Perfect segue.
I love a bit of boxing. I know you also like boxing.
I actually love the boxing. Did you watch the fight that's just happened? Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor
Ben
Benn.
too. Yeah, I did.
Benn won?
Yeah, exactly.
Benner.
I was
Ben
happy with
won.
that. I kind of love that story because
Yeah.
I just love that like sense of like it's these two lads trying to like live in the shadow of their dads and overcome. But that's not what this is about. This is about Anthony Joshua,
Yeah.
also known as the world's most weirdly well-proportioned man with
Very handsome
fantastic
man.
pectoral muscles.
Yeah.
And then Jake Paul, who, if you don't know him, where the hell have you been? But he's obviously a kind of major kind of social media dude who's gone into boxing. By all accounts, is actually a pretty good boxer. But Anthony Joshua was the 2-time heavyweight champion of the world. He got beat by Daniel Dubois last year, but now he's fighting like kind of social media influencer on Netflix, supposedly for 100 million. Like both of them are getting 50 million each.
The numbers are just insane. You're right. So it's exclusively airing on Netflix just before Christmas. So they've got a month to get into show. I mean, it's going to be 8 rounds, 8 3-minute rounds. So it's not 12 rounds. So it's interesting because Jake always sort of bangs that drum, Jake Paul. It's like, I'm a serious boxer. I'm a serious fighter. I want to be seen as a serious contender. It's like, well, then why aren't we doing 12 rounds?
But no, if you're fighting Anthony Joshua though, like that, this is the first
you're
time
either
that
in or
he's
you're
actually,
out.
it's true, but this is the first time he's actually fighting someone that feels like legitimate. But what I think's mad is like, his career has gone from getting beaten by Tommy Fury.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong, nice guy, not
he's not
really
his
the
brother.
same level
Yeah,
of kind of
yeah.
like Anthony Joshua. But I think this is interesting on 2 levels. One is like, obviously people think it sullies the kind of realm of boxing. And the other is just the money involved. Like it's absolutely astronomical levels.
And that's what
of
Eddie
money.
Hearn was saying. AJ's Anthony Joshua's promoter. He was saying, "Look, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to say no to a £50 million payday?" It's like, of course he totally understands that, some people feel, because I think some people in the boxing world are saying, AJ, what on earth are you doing? Like, why are you even entertaining this? Like, it's nonsense. Like, you're making a mockery out of, our art, our sport. You are so established and you've done so many credible, brilliant things. Why have you agreed to this? Why have you said yes to this fight? But Eddie Hearn's basically saying, what do you want
50
to do?
million reasons. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think what it also does is like, I think it's a really interesting reminder, like in every industry, which people already know, but like the sense of having influence and having a following is just it's actually more important than everything else. Like, I actually like to box quite a bit, and I know
Okay, Ben.
I know like some.
Who are you boxing, may I
I
ask?
once fought a guy, Mike Tyson. Have you heard of him? I knocked him out in round 2, but I like in my little boxing gym, there's actually like some really good boxers there, but like
Do you spar?
I do also spy.
Ben, I
like to
can't.
spar.
Why do I find this so funny?
You look at the head movement. You know what I mean? For the audio listeners, I'm like moving my
Mate.
head at such a speed that Stacey can barely see me.
No,
But
yeah.
but no, I think like, you know, to be able to kind of get on that stage, like it's
It's a
nothing really to
spectacle,
do with
isn't
Jake
it?
Paul's ability, and it's to do with the fact he has such a big following.
Of course.
And it's that kind of depressing reality now, which is like in sports, it's not really about your ability now. It's not about whether you're the best
It's a
boxer.
spectacle.
It's about building an
showbiz.
audience, having exactly the showbiz that razzmatazz that makes people pay attention.
I mean, we saw that, you know, at the weekend, Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Ben. Chris Eubank Jr. comes out in what I can only describe, my little girl's got a dressing gown. Like, she looks like a polar bear when she, you know, when she's
Wasn't he
had a
with
bath.
50 Cent as
yeah,
well?
and he's got 50 Cent,
Yeah.
like, just rapping alongside him. I was like, this is actually so lol, but I'm here for it. And that's the thing, you know, some people, particularly like boxing purists, you know, they will be outraged and they'll say this is farcical and this is nonsense and I don't know why we're going down this road, but they'll tune in. I'm going to watch it.
Well, there's also a media element to it because it also shows you that Netflix are totally seeing the value of live events because people love to get behind moments and to watch things at the same time. So the fact that they're like now really committing to these like big live paid sport events because they, you know, obviously great for advertising, but also great for creating those cultural moments. And it's an improvement on Jake Paul fighting Mike Tyson, who was like
was so
what,
silly.
50 or
But
60.
that was so daft.
you know.
Do you know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. Look, I'm so far from an expert, but I am a fan and I do love watching all the big fights.
Why do you like boxing?
I don't know. I don't even know what that says about me. I love it. I've been to
There's a violent side.
Actually, do you know what it is? I sort of really admire the discipline that's required. And I think, you know, people like Katie Taylor, like I think I've been to, there was a night, I think might have been the back end of last year, it was the first time the Royal Albert Hall put on an all-female card. And I went there and I just saw these really incredible athletes who have dedicated years of their life to like perfecting their craft. And I love the event. I love the spectacle of it all. I love the music. I love the lights. I love the kind of the fight talk beforehand. And then I love the sense of camaraderie and appreciation and respect after the fight, like directly after. They've been sort of, you know, tearing each other apart for weeks and weeks and weeks and saying really awful things. And then at the end, it's like, actually, we were only joking. And actually, thank you ever so much. We've both had a great night.
I also think what's interesting is now if you're a boxer trying to kind of make it, you've got like and you want like big money. It's like either become like a Jake Paul superstar influencer or go to Saudi Arabia and get some kind of Saudi oil money, or try and get like a kind of Netflix to back you and fight Anthony Joshua. But I think it's going to be an event. Who do you think is going to win?
Oh, come on.
Well,
look, I'm no Cole Frotch. But
I mean, should Jake Paul have beaten Mike Tyson?
There's not a universe,
But
Ben Zand, where Jake Paul is going to be able to beat Anthony Joshua, unless it's rigged. But it
also does show the madness that the boxing has become because he was going to fight Gervonta Davis, who Gervonta Davis is like tiny. He's like 5'8" or something, and he's like half the weight of Anthony Joshua. That gets cancelled, and then like a month later, he's but it's like, you know, it doesn't even make sense. Boxing's all about weight divisions.
Well, there are safety concerns. I mean, some in the boxing community are saying this fight is just too risky, like the disparity, you know, in size.
Nah, he's going to be fine. It's not even going to be real, is it? You know, like he's just going to.
Do you think it's wrestling? Do you think it's like,
well, I don't know.
His
like,
brother's
I
a
can't
wrestler.
see it from both sides.
Don't his brother wrestle? Like
his brother does. He's WWE. But I can't imagine Jake Paul's going to get knocked out because that'd just be so bad for his career. And then I can't imagine Anthony Joshua would
But what do
ever
you think Anthony Joshua's going to do in there?
He should knock him out. That would be outrageous if he doesn't.
Obviously, I hadn't appreciated, Ben, that you are actually a boxer yourself. And I'm ever so sorry I missed that. But what would your boxing name be? And what would your walkout song be?
Mine would be, well, because they always have like a kind of like, you know, Ricky the Hitman Hatton.
Yeah.
You know, Tyson, Gypsy King, Fury. Mine would be Ben, Prince of Persia, Zand.
Okay.
That's quite a cool one.
Slay, yeah.
Or like Ben, the belly puncher. No, you don't punch in bellies, do you? That's not really a legal punch move. What would yours be?
Well, I got asked
Stacey, stick it to him, Stacey.
I got asked this when I was at an event, actually. I went to a fight and, you know, BBC Sport or whatever were there and they said, oh, what would your name be? And I was so cringe. I actually can't even bear to say it again. I think I was but you know, when they sort of put you on the spot and you're like, oh, say something. You don't want to be a bore on the carpet. So I think I was like, oh, I think I even said something like dangerous Dooley. Like something so
Dangerous
generic
Dooley.
and so naff.
it's
I was like, that is
gross.
so naff. I actually
Cut the
said to the
podcast.
girl, I was like, babe, please don't actually use that. 'Cause that
Dangerous
is so
Dooley.
0 out of 10. And they obviously
Delulu,
put it.
dangerous Dooley.
Yeah, Delulu Dooley is absolutely much more apt. But I couldn't fight, even I could never. Like when I was watching those girls, because Daniel Dubois, his sister Caroline Dubois, she was there fighting that night, and she was like a machine. I could not believe what I was witnessing. I thought, there's not a world where you're saying to me, get in that ring and fight. No way. As soon as the bell rang, I'd get them to throw the towel in. I don't know if you still get the fee, but
I actually think you still do get the fee in some
really.
spots. But this is actually the good thing about there is like a really, I suppose, Britishness is still well represented in boxing. You know what I mean? Like Britain is still such a hub of boxing.
Yeah.
So if you want to kind of promote some good British values, Britishness in boxing is a good way to do it. Yeah, exactly.
Go to the boxing. I mean, purists, you know, people who adore boxing, they have concerns, and they're basically saying, look, you're kind of belittling our beloved sport. You know, this can't be taken seriously. Like, this is ludicrous. This is nonsense. It's silly. It's become farcical.
Yeah, I don't really buy that argument though. I think boxing's also always been a freaking spectacle. I mean, it's always been about money. It's not like they're doing this because they just like,
I don't
some
know.
people like it because they like
it's-
boxing, but there's always been big events. I mean, you've had like, you know, David Hay fought like that really tall fella, I forgot what his name was, Value Ever, whatever. Like it was David and Goliath. There's been like crazy, like Muhammad Ali, I think, fought like random people over time. You always have these exhibition matches.
Seriously, and legacy is, you know, it's really important to them. They want to sort of achieve, you know, great. You know, they sort of want the belts, they want the titles, they want to go down in history as being one of the greats.
But I guess what you do when you're Anthony Joshua, you know, he's been beaten by Usyk twice.
Yeah.
He got beaten by Dubois in his last fight. It's kind of, he's aging, so you're kind of offered this thing which is on Netflix. It's a bit of fun, and you get him given 50 million for it. Like, you know, I'm like, I get it. I don't think and I think, you know, there's an argument with Jake Paul that he's like raising awareness to boxing, and I think this kind of like influencer boxing,
I've got to say, he does do a lot for female boxing.
And influencer boxing, I think, has brought so many more people into
Joey
boxing.
Essex fought, didn't he?
And like the whole kind of KSI kind of like misfits boxing world. So I think like there's I think it brings a lot more people into it than it pulls out.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like a net positive.
Also, it's interesting because I feel like instinctively I am a bit like, as a fan of boxing, I'm a bit like, oh, come on, like, give me a break, Jake Paul. But I also, on the other hand, like, I do like it when people diversify, and I do like it when people do things that are unexpected. And I don't like the idea myself of being put in sort of, you know, one box.
This sounds like you're about to call someone out for a influencer boxer match.
And guys, I can exclusively reveal.
You've done acting.
Who should I call out?
Yeah, I like, you know, people, you know, diversifying.
Who would I fight?
Jodie Comer. It's me and you.
Who was I call out? No, but I'm saying it's like I'm a bit of a hypocrite, and I'm sort of you know, on the one hand, I'm saying I do think it's ludicrous that Jake Paul has put himself in this situation, and we should be forced to be taking it seriously. But on the other hand, I do like it when people are unexpected and don't just, you know, kind of nod along to other people's ideals. Like,
I'm going to call out Timothy Chalamet just because he's really famous, and if I got,
you could take
and also
him.
I feel like I could probably take Timothy Chalamet.
You could,
you know what I mean? So like, but if that happened, I'd get like a way bigger profile. I'd probably get to like beat him, and then that'd be great for me personally. So
okay, I need to think about who I'm going to call out. Emily, our producers. Our producers put Emily Maitlis. Can I say something?
I don't know if you'd beat Emily Maitlis. Like she seems like she's got quite a lot about her.
She's a great woman. Listen, I admire Emily for many different reasons. Or
Lily Allen, just because she's quite big.
She is a bit older than me, Emily. So maybe that would be the only thing I'd have on my side. I'm going to have a think about this.
Have a think. We can do it. We can bring it up in the next
Lise
part.
Doucette, Emily Maitlis, Paula Guerin. Who else? Beth Rigby.
Yeah, wow.
Who could I
take
take
them
on?
all out. You kind of finally, you know, kind of...
I'll show them.
Yeah, knocking them out, the journalistic kind of industry.
I need to get some chic shorts.
Yeah,
Stats.
I like that. So I'm going to go up against Timothy Chalamet. and you're going up against Lise Doucette and Emily
Yeah, no,
Maitlis
great.
in a duo.
Good.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay,
that's a good way to wrap
fantastic.
the podcast.
Oh my God, hang on. No, I've just thought of my name. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Scrappy Dooley Doo.
Scrappy Dooley Doo.
Scrappy Dooley Doo.
That is worse than Dangerous Dooley.
I'm obsessed
That's
with
a
Scrappy
joke
Dooley
that
Doo.
Minnie would laugh at, but for me,
No, that's great, Ben. I'm
Wow.
telling you, that would land. Right, gang, that's us for another week. Thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you next Wednesday. Another episode of Untangled. We're on Spotify and we've got our very own YouTube channel now.
yeah, which is big news. So please go and subscribe, leave a comment, like today's episode, send it to Emily Maitlis so she can respond
Can
about
you
this
not?
kind of
Because
call.
I adore Emily Maitlis and
I-
I can't bear the idea of her going, what on earth is that? What's Stacey Julian been saying about me?
Okay,
Nothing.
we'll send it to Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
Chalamet? I don't even know how you say his name. You can also email us on untangled@zand.land. This is your bit, so I'll say bye, gang.
See you next
Magic.
week.
See you
Scrappy
next
Doo.
week.